Hi. Hello. Welcome, Dave. This is our first attempt. You're the first guest on something that I'm thinking about calling Northwest Corner history. For lack of because I don't have a tremendous imagination. I can't think of what else to call it.
It works.
And I don't, it's a Google Meet that we're just kind of using here. It's very low tech, but I just thank you for being willing to do this, and we're going to give it a shot and see what happens.
Look forward to it.
Just by way of a little bit of background for the audience, my name's Darren, and I met Dave by I had his children in my history class, and then I've had him come in to speak to my class about his experiences, and then I reached out and asked him if he'd be willing to come on and maybe talk about, because there's so many people that live in our area that have such amazing stories, and I'm honored that you would be here and be our first guest.
Well, the honor's mine, and you have my eternal gratitude for being part of the amazing education my kids got at Region One, and they just turned 36 the other day. Both live in California, leading their lives, and that's talk about gratitude. I'm grateful for that. So if my experience or whatever helps move that process along and everything, I'm honored to be part of it.
Well, I'm stunned to hear they're in their 30s.
I know.
And as far as I just would say, I'm on a great team. We have a great team in Region One, all the elementary schools and the high school, and it takes a village, as they say. Everybody's taught. Well, it takes a whole region to educate kids, and
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to have landed on a great team. So,
and by my observation, being a member of Cornwall's school board, man, oh boy, the administration, I don't think I've ever seen a better one. They really,
right.
They are just making this work, and God, we're lucky to have them.
We're very lucky. Mm. So I've asked you today if you wanted to speak about your experiences in Vietnam. That's why I had you in my class. And, if at any time I ask a question or something that is a place that you don't want to go, please feel free to tell me that you may not want to discuss that. But I'm just fascinated. Well, I mean, are you from this region originally? I forget. I don't.
No. My kids have relocated to California, but that's where their mother and I came from. I was actually born in Los Angeles. That not too many people can say that. Everybody goes there. Nobody's born there, but I was. 1950. So yep, I'm 70, and I served in Vietnam from 70 to 72, which would have been, as far as that war was concerned, the tail end of it. And so the draft caught up with me, and got drafted. And the only, the sort of a key part of my story was I was a conscientious objector. I didn't want to carry a gun, but I was willing to serve. So they said, no problem. We're going to stick you in the medical end of things. And so they made me a medic. And then the joke was kind of on me that, they sent me off to the infantry, which is, of course, all the guys with a gun. So I ended up with them, but never had to carry one, never did anything I regretted. I was very, very lucky in that regard, where,
Well, I would say you're lucky. Growing up in Los Angeles in the 50s must have been an amazing time in the 50s and 60s.
You play the hand you're dealt, and I had a wonderful childhood upbringing. I was a middle child of five, and parents that provide everything. I mean, you really, once you become a parent, you realize what the job yours did, and I won the lottery as far as parents were concerned. So had a wonderful life, and made it to the Northwest Corner. Since we'll stick to our theme here, in 1987. Married at the time to Alice, and we had vacationed up here. And at the time, we're living in Florida. Our first jobs and things were there. First house. That's where the twins were born. And we vacationed up here and were just knocked out with how beautiful it was. And just as circumstances would have it, we ended up purchasing the restaurant that basically is right across the street from the covered bridge in West Cornwall. It's been any number of iterations. Honestly, it's a bicycle store right now. But from 87 to 97, it was Cadwell's Corner. That was our cafe. Alice was an amazing cook. And everybody said, you should open your own restaurant. So that's what we ended up doing. And I mainly ended up running the place. She got hired by the Hotchkiss School to basically create their dance department. And she spent the next 25 years there, teaching there.
Wow.
Our kids went K through 8 at Cornwall and high school at Hussey. And, we lasted 10 years, which I think for a restaurant is okay. And I was able to use sort of my experience as a medic in Vietnam. That it made a very easy segue to volunteer for Cornwall's ambulance. Certainly on an emotional level, to be able to deal with that experience that to this day is very hard to make any sense of. But to play it out to where, this makes total sense. Our system of neighbors looking after neighbors, and it's how we do it. And that, I was proud to do it. And so that, that seemed to make sense. And, as I sort of kiddingly say, when you move to a town and feed people and then show up when they dial 911, you're well liked. So that endeared me to the neighborhood. So, and I've been here.
I never cease to be amazed at how quickly I see people that I've just a few moments before might have seen in the grocery store or, earlier that day, and there's an accident, God forbid, or something. But there they are in all of the towns. Our emergency volunteer and ambulance workers are absolutely amazing. And we can't thank them enough.
Amazing bunch. And, it's how we do it. So there we sort of jumped ahead to, how
that's okay.
This past experience has affected my life here. And
if I could ask you about being a conscientious objector, just in doing a little bit of research, I went on Google Books and I looked at there's a few books. I put Vietnam medic into the Google search bar, and I read about a few accounts of people who talked about having to apply as a conscientious objector. And there are some movie accounts that I've seen where there's the name of the movie. I'd written it down. It escaped me right now.
Hacksaw Ridge.
That's right. He wanted to be a conscientious objector, and they gave him a hard time about it. And I read about people in the Vietnam era who had to apply and go through interviews and be asked if they were a communist. Did you have a hard time going through any of that?
It was actually pretty. You're right. You did have to, but for me, it was not a problem at all because I was willing to serve. Now, if you went in there and said, "Look, I don't want to go at all," you really had to make your case. So in my case, it was, look, I was 19 years old, for goodness sakes. That it was a case for me. I had brothers who had served ahead of me. And so I sort of knew the mentality of the military of it's not so much about you, it's your buddy. He is counting on you. Are you going to let that guy down? You better not, you better be locked and loaded and ready to go and everything. And it's like, if you're counting on me to shoot someone else to protect him, I'm not so sure I'm your guy. I'm not sure I could pull that trigger. You shouldn't count on me to do that. Now, I'm sure there's other jobs you'll give me, and I'll take one of those. So I'm you got me. I got no medical reason to get out of this. And so, and I didn't, I just wasn't that, bent towards, oh, well, I'm off to Canada or taking one of those options. Because goodness knows, by 1970, it was not a popular war. And, and now that I'm 50 years removed and you watch the Ken Burns documentary, it makes even less sense. It's like, my gracious, that was just one terrible decision after another that, that
It's
culminated.
yeah. I was just struck by one guy's account that I read. Vietnam medic was the name of the book, and he just accounted that they, from what I understood, they kind of gave him a little bit of a hard time, asking, why exactly, and he just, look, I just want to be a medic, for some of the same reasons that you said. So, what was the training like? I don't. In some of the accounts I went looking for to see, did you have to go through the same sort of boot camp that everybody else did with conditioning, or was there a different boot camp that you would go through?
You've got it right. It basically everyone, and I mean everybody, has to go through the 8 weeks basic training, all the conditioning and up before dawn and all that sort of thing. And it's been described as worst 8 weeks of any man's life. And the only thing you have to hold you together is the shared misery, with everybody else. But that's what builds a team. I mean, it's all part of their plan. It's you get whipped into shape. So everybody does the 8 weeks, and then you go on to your advanced training. And for me, you ready for this? I had actually had experience when I went to high school, Pasadena High School, class of '68, and I worked as an athletic trainer, and so I had a bit of experience. And so they looked at that and said, "Yeah, we're going to make you a physical therapist assistant." So that was the trail I was on. So that was the trail I was on. If you wanted to be a lab technician, an X-ray technician, any one of those other jobs, everyone in the medical field had to go to a basic 10-week medic class that everybody took. So that, you did your 8 weeks, then your 10 weeks, and then on to whatever your specialty was going to be. So I'm smack in the middle of that 10-week, training. And Nixon announces, "Oh, we're in Cambodia." Apparently we had already been there, but he just made it official. So at that point, once it was official, they cut everybody's orders, sent all of us to Vietnam. And so that's so much from my PT career in the Army. Off I am with that group. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not carrying a gun. Somebody will put me in a hospital there. So imagine my surprise when I show up there. And it's like, yeah, we're going to put you with the 1st Cavalry Division. If you have any of those images of helicopters coming in for landing and guys piling off of them, I was one of those guys. And I
Well,
was,
I did. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say I was attached to those guys. I was a medic attached to the infantry. I was considered attached personnel. The name of the book I've never written. That would be the title. Attached.
I would read that book. That'd be a great book.
The great book.
I did read that.
Here's my recommendation. Great book to read is the things they carried.
Absolutely.
Brian. The only thing I'd add is I'd love a chapter to say, because he was an infantryman, I'd have the medic chapter of the things we carried, because it was a whole other menu, just because of our job, it was just different, but the same, different but the same. I mean, all that food, all that water, all those things, those carried, we carried all that stuff too.
I know that book was assigned reading in the English department at Housatonic, and
Right.
So I would kind of go up and peruse the book closet every once in a while, look for something that I could borrow and read. And I read that, and it just blew me away.
Yeah. No, it got all the notice it should have. It was that's a masterpiece, and the one I recommend to everybody. Yeah, it was one of those. I read that book and just kept nodding. It was like, yep, yep, yep. And he clearly had lived it,
Right.
and then as far as movies, I'm getting ahead of us. Platoon is the one, the Oliver Stone film. Because let's face facts, Oliver Stone was a platoon leader, in Vietnam, and we were speaking earlier, how, or just how you run into people. Just an hour ago, I ran into Ian Ingersoll, the cabinet maker in West Cornwall, and he had the exact same job Oliver Stone did. He was a platoon leader, just like Stone.
Is that
And
right?
and we served in the same unit, though we would have, he was leaving as I arrived, and we would have just crisscrossed a little bit, but we had, we were, total, comrades as far as the experience is concerned, because we lived the same thing. But anyway, Platoon really, it now, keep in mind, it has to be a movie. So everything portrayed, I'm sure, happened to somebody sometime, but not consolidated like that. Trust me, my experience was unending hours of absolute boredom, lots of playing of cards, lots of hurry up and wait, punctuated by moments of absolute terror, just, the worst. So, and it's been explained to me by my social worker with the VA, because I had never even thought of it, just because it is the hurry up and wait aspect of it is apparently the worst kind of stress there is. That it just is, it's terror. I just never thought of it that way. It just was. And it's like, gosh, now that you point that out to me, it really is. Because it's life and death stuff. I mean, it's like, are we going? We're not? We getting in those choppers? We landed? What? So it's, and I always like to just really emphasize the point. When I turned 20 when I was over there. So I was 19 turning into 20. We were kids. We were so young. And of course, those are the only people you're gonna, persuade to go do that sort of thing. So it just,
Yeah.
you have to remind people of just, and I'd like to think we're thinking real hard before we go to war anymore. But man, if Iraq and Afghanistan are any indication, we
Uh,
didn't learn our lessons.
it seems to, again, a little bit of research that I did on that. You said the First Cavalry Division, right? Uh, Air Cav, Air Mobile, right? I mean, I
Right.
guess I'm thinking of
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now, or
Yeah. Exactly.
and
That was the we never played Wagner. It was, but it was very visual for a film. That was fun. But and God knows the photography, as far as the helicopter movement and all that. Boy, it took me back. It was like, yeah, they got those cameras right in there, because that
the no, I just read that in a little bit of research about that division, that I think that it was the second most casualty rate the highest casualty rate in the Army, given the nature of, as you said, going in and landing these soldiers everywhere. And I think there was one other unit that I read about, which was a Marine unit, a Marine division that took higher casualties. But the First Cavalry Division had, I can imagine the medics were very busy, because they had, in the Army, they had the highest casualty rate. And I think the second or third highest casualty rate in the war.
Well, that's the first I've heard it, but it comes as no surprise. And now, keep in mind, we were massive. It was a huge unit. I mean, lots and lots of divisions, battalions, companies. There were many of us, and so it was huge. So it was a big club.
One thing that kind of has struck me with your story is you go through your training and you've had your 10 weeks training,
Mhm.
and then you're shipped out. Now, was the 10 weeks of training predominantly classroom sort of thing, or is still guy yelling and screaming in your face?
No,
You image that guy better.
you got that in basic. So this was a little more reasonable, a little more academic. But Darren, I swear to God, there was a big emphasis on marching. It's like, really, we really got to march a lot and all that. Well, again, it's unit cohesion, and so anytime between classes, you had to get in formation and march and make sure the book, you had a bag, you had your materials in, and that all had to be, you had to, that all had to, you had to march swinging that in the correct fashion. It was just absurd of the details they had you do, and it was the most cursory training you can imagine. Um, there was again a lot of emphasis on just carrying a litter. So you put down a cot and you put your casualty on it, and there's four guys, and you all lift at the same time and practice that. You know how many times I actually did that in Vietnam? I can tell you it was zero. I never lifted a litter once. Now a jungle penetrator that a chopper came and threw something down to you, and you lashed the guy in there, and then you hooked him up, and he got shot back up. Yeah, I did that on a kind of regular basis, but I never got an iota of training to do that. So, in other words, the vast majority of my training I got on the job of just doing it. And honestly, I think it's a temperament thing to where my experience, especially when it comes to EMS or emergencies and things, that there's just kind of two kind of people, one that just run the other way, and then the other that run towards it, and it just breaks down to that. So I'm certainly in the latter, where yeah, what can I do to help? And so I learned. I don't know. Yeah, okay. I got a story for you. So here's my first war story. So this was my first day on the job. I sent out to the jungle. It was a classic. These guys had been out for a while, and in the chopper they cleared a landing zone where it basically hovered overhead, went straight down, let everybody out, and then went straight back up again and was gone. So there I was, and I was replacing Bob Martelluzzi, a name I will never forget. Met him once. He was the medic who was finished. I was taking his place, and so that night you put two poncho liners together to make a little tent, and I bunked up with Bob, and he's showing me the ropes and everything else, and late that night it's dark, and we hear a voice outside, and it's guy got doc, and he goes, yeah, what is it? And this is to Bob, of course. I'm brand new there. He goes, doc, I think I've got spinal meningitis. It's like, yikes, that's pretty serious diagnosis here in the middle of the jungle. He goes, why do you say that? He says, oh, my neck, it really hurts. I think it's my spine. I got meningitis. Now, keep in mind, everyone, and I mean everyone, is looking for an excuse to get out of there. You cannot have it any worse. You've been drafted. They sent you to Vietnam. They've sent you to the bush. That's it. There's no, oh, it gets worse from here. POW, I guess, would be your next, cliff. But anyway, so this guy is going self-diagnosing with a sore neck that he's got meningitis. And I said, so I chime in. I said, have you done anything to, strain your back or your neck? And he immediately goes, I'm the gunner. And it's like, and so Bobby was saying he carries the large machine gun. That's his job. And I said, can you get somebody else to carry it? He goes, fuck yeah. I don't, I'll get somebody else. If I get you to excuse me. I said, yeah. I think you need to let your neck have a break, that, and I said, and then I said, have you had a cold? Have you had a cold? He goes, no, no. I said, well, you probably shouldn't worry about the meningitis because I don't know a lot about it, but it's basically an infection of your spinal cord, and you'd have other symptoms that would go with it, like a cold. That would go side by side with that. And he goes, oh, okay. And then the line that will be burned into my memory forever of him going, who's that? And Bob goes, the new doc. I had arrived. So
There you go.
there in a nutshell was my job. Don't ignore people. Be compassionate. Try to be intelligent, and fake your way through it, like we do in life. So there's my story. That was Dave, the new doc, and from that moment on, I was doc. And probably 9 months later, Fred Trevino did that for me. That's the guy that took my place. Never forget him. Met him once. Bob Martolucci, Fred Trevino. Isn't that wild? I can't remember when I had breakfast this morning, but I can remember those names.
I can imagine.
Darren, I want to thank you for this. These are you were worried about memories that I might like. I haven't thought of this in a long time. So it's nice to be able to talk about this. So I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. Are you kidding? It's amazing stuff. And I think that, anything that you could do to help humanize these things for us who are trying to understand what that might have been like, and to add to the history, because I know that when you came to my classroom, the kids are sort of reticent to ask questions, it seems, and we want them to ask questions, and they don't always seem to have. Sometimes a kid threw you a pretty good question, I think, in the times that you were there, but very often, and one of the things we try to work on at our school is, don't be afraid of asking questions. Questions are a sign of intelligence. It's not a sign of weakness. Be bold enough to go out there and ask these questions. So one thing that you had said to the kids that always struck me is the nature of how you were just, I guess you can never fully prepare for these things, and there's no in between being in combat and not in combat, but it seemed to me that you were just thrust into there instantly, almost moments after having gotten there, from what you had explained in the past.
Well, you're immediately. I always had to laugh because the basic training, the 8 weeks part, and everything else, you had a lot of practice on what they called the low crawl, where you got enemies shooting over your head, so you're on the ground crawling along. Keep your head down, all that sort of thing. And I just remember how amusing it was to me when I actually experienced it. Darren, I can absolutely promise you, you don't have to be trained. It comes naturally to you. If you have somebody shooting over you, you get as low as you possibly can. And all I could think of was that just mindless training of, they didn't have to teach me this. I figured it out all by myself, because I could get shot if I get up any higher. So it's insane. It's just crazy. And again, my platoon, all those things happened. That was very well written, that he lived that. He accumulated all those stories, but it's a compilation. None of that happened in that intensity to one guy. They had to make a movie. So that's would, so don't. But as far as the accuracy of the details, I watched that movie and I thought, gosh, you would need someone like me to translate what they're talking about. He'd throw around language like, don't hit that guy, you'll end up in LBJ, and it's like, well, LBJ, what's Lyndon Baines Johnson got to do with it? No, it's the Long Bin Jail. That's LBJ. So, who's going to get that, unless you live there. So he got enormous detail in there that only guys who served picked up on. So, we were kids. Again, I keep going back to now that I've had the perspective. For me personally, I basically spent 30 years just being a dad. You know what I'm talking about. You got life to live and everything. Never talked about it. It never came up. And then I gave that speech, and that was the real turning point. And that's what you and I have used, as the educational thing for your kids. That's something they can watch, relate to. They've seen, people give those kind of speeches, and then to have, well, here's the actual guy who said it. Now you can quiz him. And I always do my best to just relate, especially the seniors and things in your class, of the huge difference between the life you have right now and when I was your age is the draft. We just were waiting to have your shoulder tapped to say, come with us, Sonny. And it wasn't like you had a choice in it, and that you guys don't have that. And it's impossible to they have no notion of that. As well, they shouldn't. I don't ever want them to. Though, that being said, I'm sort of a proponent. I would not be against some sort of service that, kids would, at that age would have to do. Not necessarily military, but golly, this infrastructure thing we're talking about, boy, it's going to be a lot of jobs. This is just because the takeaway I'm always grateful for that I got in the Army. And I like to think I came to it with a measure of it. I had a wonderful upbringing, again, great parents and everything else. But golly, Darren, I'll tell you, it taught you to get along. How, and that you got to learn that. And when you see where other people are coming from, I always bring up in my basic training, I shared a bunk beds. And, I'm on the top. The bottom bunk was a guy named Manuel Garcia. And we'd sit around and moan and groan and everything else about how terrible it was. And I'll never forget Manuel saying, he goes, yeah, I know it's all bad. He goes, you know what, though? Boy, I get 3 meals a day here. And man, boy, talk about cold water in your face of, wow, how am I ever going to meet Emmanuel Garcia and the life he came from and exist with him? So that shared experience where you see how people get in their moccasins and things, that's a positive thing that I think was a healthy part of my military experience.
Well, that's, I mean, a story like that, that little 10-minute conversation that you had with your bunkmate, I mean, that's worth more than gold, so that and our plan is to, put this on YouTube and just as a history guy, it's little things like that, I mean, obviously now more than ever, people having to get along we need it more than ever. And that little anecdote that you just shared is, and that moment of realization for you. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's that stuff that maybe somebody out there, if this goes out into YouTube, and I don't know what's going to happen with it. But if somebody sees that and has a little bit of a moment of realization about their lives or the human condition, then it's all worth it. So when and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, if I have your permission, maybe I'll try, or I don't know whose permission I would need to get, but that your speech is on YouTube.
Right.
I don't know if I can link to that.
Yeah,
I'll try,
sure you can.
so people can see it.
And my son Wes, who you taught, is a professional editor. That's what he does. And for a long time, he put it on. It was in 2 parts, and now he's got it all consolidated in one. So there's no gap or anything. And it's funny. We've never, and I've never played that game where you have all the hashtags and all that stuff, because um, uh, the other aspect of my story that I know you know about, but where, man, I've gotten way more than my fair share of audience for my story, was the fact I gave that speech in Cornwall. It's very well received. A friend of mine videotaped it, and it ended up with Tom Brokaw, the newsman, and who was a friend, a customer at my cafe, and he ended up putting me in a book about the 1960s. Oh, they're just hearing our voices. I better not pull the book out. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I love this. This is something I can brag about. I had nothing to do with it. Just happened this way. So he got my story from the speech that I gave, and it wasn't even like I gave a title to the speech. It was basically Memorial Day. It's in Cornwall. There's a speaker. Tom had given, I remember Tom's speech because we got sort of a sneak preview of The Greatest Generation. That he says, I'm about to put out a book, and this is what all about. So we heard about that. Sam Waterston's given that speech a couple of times. The guy's played Lincoln, on screen. So, he's got stories. So this is quite a legacy of doing this speech. And I was the first one to ever speak about Vietnam. And it wasn't even a matter of me, oh, golly, what am I going to talk about? I knew exactly what I was going to talk about, because it was just the emotions I had every day every time I went to that event. It just did my heart good, because it was like, wow, here's a town that really cares about this. And they really, make it an appropriate day. And it's made extra appropriate by the end, when let's all go to the carnival. Let's now just have a good time, because this is what we fought about. This is an extension of why we're remembering all this stuff. And for me, it was just a story, which is an exercise I would never invite anybody to do. It's, I don't think, healthy, but for me, it was the subject of what I was talking about, of just the whole notion. If you were to stop to think of, well, golly, what's the worst day of your life? I mean, who'd want to do something like that? But for me, it was simple, because it was a terrible day I had in Vietnam, where just everything went wrong, and we were engaged in combat. We got hit by our own artillery, and immediately had 4 dead and 11 wounded in a second. And one of the guys killed was a fellow medic. Our captain was killed, and there was 20-year-old Dave with the worst day of his life. And so I was just telling that story, and tried to sum it up with the fact that that's that many years ago, and now I've replaced it with new friends and the Cornwall Volunteer Fire Department and the ambulance squad. And I've got a new band of brothers and sisters. I've got this great town that's embraced me like they did when they all thought I was dead. The medic was killed with the captain. I was the captain's medic, was another medic. So it was a compelling story that was mine. This was my story, and what I wanted to share with everybody. And I was just overwhelmed with the response people had. I just wanted to be standing by the end of it. It was very emotional, and first time I'd ever spoken in front of a crowd. And so the fact that people responded this way, it got in Tom's hands. He then turned it over. We talked about it. He turned it over to a lady named Liz Boyer. And I don't know if you know this, Liz has a real niche profession, where she's a ghostwriter. And so when it came to just the details and all the interviewing, we must have talked. I'm sure if you added it all up, it would probably been 2-3 hours. I mean, we really just talked about everything. She got all the details. This is what she does. So she was the ghostwriter for this book. She was the ghostwriter for Greatest Generation, Tom's mega it's part of our language now, for gracious sakes. She helped Hillary Clinton write It Takes a Village. This lady knows what she's doing. And so anyway, it's very flattering to have a professional like that interested in your story. And so not only did I make it into the book, but the chapter of the book, Boom, it's called, Tales of the 1960s. And so the chapter title is The Never Ending War. And the other people featured are John McCain and John Kerry and Chuck Hagel. And so, names we all know and everything. But the first name is Dave Cadwell. So I got top billing over all these, famous guys. And so my story has really, been told and listened to. So I'm a lucky guy for that, and feel appreciated. So I have no idea if it makes any impression on your students when I see them. I enjoy being there. I always try to relate to the fact I know I'm an old, I look like your grandfather probably by this time, but the story I'm telling you about, I was your age. I was just a little bit older than you, not hardly much at all. And that, and again, I always ask who in the class has anybody that served there. And we always get some, usually an uncle or a grandfather or something at this point. But do the math. I mean, it's just thinned out now.
Yeah.
But gosh, I think 3 million served there when all was said and done. It's a lot of people.
It's amazing. And, the more that the stories that still are coming out as more and more guys, as you said, they might come home from the war and hadn't talked about it at all. And then something, for whatever reason, some of the veterans do start to talk more about it. Is my understanding that that some guys don't ever talk about it at all.
Right. I get it.
Right. I completely.
Yeah, it's too painful. Boy, do I get that. And I've had a general attitude in life of, if you got bad stuff, replace it with good stuff. And it's pretty rudimentary, but I've it's worked okay for me. And God, here's and I just in talking to Ian, because again we had parallel experiences in Vietnam. Just that whole notion of 50 years, that's just and that I think I've told you this. The day you walk out of there, or for me, and I think I can speak for many, the day you walk out of there, it's a gift. I just made it through that. I'm never going to experience anything as bad as that for the rest of my life. That was the worst. I survived. I'm walking away from it. And if somebody then would have told me, well, Dave, you got another 50 years ahead of you. Oh, I would have laughed in their face because of what you just experienced. You are so pessimistic. And so, you look at the dark side of everything, of just what a mess you just came from. And keep in mind, when I was done with my combat tour of duty, I actually extended my tour so I could get out of the Army when I was done. It just didn't make any sense for them to reassign me. So, but I could choose my job, and I worked in the hospital that I sent my casualties to. So it made it sort of full circle. And keep in mind, I moved over to there. I had my own bed. I had you hired a Vietnamese woman to do all your laundry and all that. We had a mess hall, serve 4 hot meals a day, swimming pool, movie theater outside in the middle of the PX, where you go do your shopping. I was on the largest Army base outside of the United States. I had it made, and I'm still in Vietnam. I had just finished a year of carrying all my own food and water, on a daily basis. I went from that experience. And you ready for this, Darren? I got paid the same. Everybody got combat pay. since you were in country, you got that pay. And it was like, no, there's something wrong with that. You would think you get a little extra for doing that.
It's
But
amazing.
anyway, and then I worked 6 months in a hospital, and one would think, and they would be right, of, well, Dave, you had hit the gravy train, and you had a much better experience and everything working there. But I'm here to tell you, now that I've had this 50, the 50 years perspective, to look back of what kind of how that affected me emotionally, because just to show up to work, and believe you me, we worked very, very hard, very identical to the MASH television program. It was that sort of environment, and
Okay.
it was you partied hard and then you worked hard, and our shifts would be 7 in the morning, 7 at night, or reverse, whatever you did. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. You worked, and so. I always tell the story. I worked in the intensive care ward, in the neurosurgical intensive care, and I'll never forget the morning we walked in for rounds, and the doctor said, "Well, him and him and him, just shut off the respirators. There's no hope. They're beyond our help." And so, it's the end. And my reaction to that was, oh man, does it suck to be me? I got 3 bodies. I got to get to the morgue. I got 3 beds I got to scrub down. I got all those oxygen tanks to get back to the shed. I'm got work, work, work out of it. Boy, poor me. And now I can look back at that and go, all right, stupid. Where was your humanity? Where these were actual human beings. And the one thing I remember about it was totally international. One was from Thailand,
Hmm.
one was from Korea, and then one was a GI whose name is up on that wall. I don't remember what that name was because it was all part of the job. And you had to show up to do that sort of work. You had to do that. Now, did that make me an ideal husband? I can promise you it didn't. I mean, I look back now, it made me very emotionally unavailable. And, I've realized it now. I've learned my lessons and everything. But, it certainly it has lined my life with regrets of the person that made me. And now, yeah, it sort of makes me angry that instead of at 19, 20, and 21 going on to college like all my friends did, or most of my friends and everything else, they had me do that. And nobody should be put into that. I mean, and we get into the politics end of it. By 1970, we had absolutely no business being there. We had no mission. There was no, oh, what are we there for? It was pure momentum. We had no way to get out, and we were there, so we'll just keep sitting. So just plug yourself into my mind of how that makes you feel inside, that's what your country feels about you. They don't care at all. They don't care a bit of who you are. My name could be up on that wall, and no one they wouldn't care that I was just part of that system that they shifted over there. And yeah, now I've had the luxury of having a wonderful life, and life went on. And like I say, I ignored the bad stuff, replaced it with good stuff. So I've had a great life and everything else. But golly, it's an unanswerable question of what would if I hadn't experienced that, how would my life have been different? And can't answer it, but it'll always, I'll be scratching my head on that one.
Well, on behalf of uh, all of us in Region One, I want to thank you for your service and for having gone through what you went through, and for sharing that with us today. I mean, I'm blown away really by your generosity of your spirit in terms of sharing that all with us and putting it out there. And the hope is that it might bring some educate people about what some guy from California gets thrust into this. What was your story like, and help us to understand that. Uh, as we're walking around, as one of the Karen Davenport, who's a teacher at Housatonic, always had a placard in her room saying, it always struck me that every person you come across is dealing with something. So at the least you can do is be kind, because you never know what that is. And, you might be waiting behind somebody in line at the bank, and it could be a Vietnam vet who's been through the things that you have been. So hopefully, your story, and we put it out there, and to learn about history, might help some other people either understand a little bit better as best they can what happened, or maybe bring some comfort to somebody else who went through that. So I'm just so grateful for your generosity.
Darren, uh, I, I am equally grateful to be asked, and it's funny because you and I were speaking earlier about our experience over at Sharon Playhouse, and I know we share the just the complete delight of getting to meet new people and things like this. And I gosh, I feel I've gotten to know you better, with this experience, and that our friendship is growing. And way to go! You come on. We've already talked about this. The hills are alive with interesting people with stories, and this is you're really creating something here, and I was honored to be on board at the beginning. So,
Well, the honor is mine, and I thank you again. And I don't know, what's going to happen with it, and how it's going to grow. I'm not very good with the technological end of things, but I have people who can try to help me. And
there you go.
it might grow someday. We can get all those fancy microphones and some video cameras and things.
Yep.
But
Well, we'll make do with what we got.
I just keep feeling this compulsion to do it, and I thought about it, and I know you've been so kind to come into my classroom at times, and so I thought I'd give you a call, and I'm certainly glad I did.
Great. Me too.
Excellent.
All right, buddy. Well,
all right.
And let her go, and I just wish you great success with this, and have every confidence that you're going to do fine, and that because I just know you have unending resources out there that hey, we're full of stories, and it's nice to be able to tell them.
Well, again, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, buddy. Good work. Bye, Darren.
Bye.
Stop.